Hi, welcome to the Civic Pulse with David Bonior and Brian Brady, where we talk politics and current event issues of the day. We have a great show coming up. If you've enjoyed watching this show, please hit the subscribe button or the like button on the YouTube channel. That helps us out. We'd appreciate it. We have an amazing guest today. Really lucky 48 hours before the election to have Al Jabbar with us from Orange County, California. Al, you and I met when you were the board chair of the Anaheim Union High School District, an amazing school district out in Anaheim. And now you are also the first Sri Lankan elected official in the country, Sri Lankan American, I should say. And you are now the chief of staff to one of the more influential politicians and leaders in Orange County, the vice chairman of the Orange County Board of Supervisors, Doug Chafee. So we're really delighted to have you on the show today, and thanks for coming. How are you doing?
Absolutely. Thank you, David and Brian, for having me here. And I'm happy to join and discuss some of our hot issues, so to speak. So looking forward to it.
We have some light issues and heavy issues to jump into today. Let's start with your personal journey a little bit, how you got into public service, and tell us that story.
Yeah, my journey was, I migrated here to the United States when I was 16 or 17, I think, in 1996. But even before that, since I was a kid, I think I always say that it was my dad who got me into politics, because he was engaged in politics in Sri Lanka. So I would always go with him when he talks about politics. And my vivid memory was going with him to meet the Prime Minister of Sri Lanka. And, that kind of gave me that little bug, right? And so I was very active. Even at 10, 11, I was very vocal about politics in Sri Lanka. And then I migrated here. And then, that was still in me. So when I migrated here, the first thing that I did before going to even my advisor at community college was to walk into our student government office and say, like, how do I get involved? And then I ran for student senate, student body president, right, student trustee, and then eventually graduated. And I wanted to give back to the community. And that was something that was instilled in by my dad and my parents, my mom too. So wherever you go, try to give something back to the community. So I thought the best thing for me to do was to kind of get involved in the local community. So I started organizing in little neighborhoods about, little things like street lights, speed bumps, those type of things. And then somebody asked me, like, you know what, you got a kid, why don't you run for school board, because you know our issues. Mm-hmm. And I ran the first time, I lost. And then I said, like, all right, well, that was a heavy punch, especially when you run for office and lose the first time. It kind of feels like a gut punch to you. You don't want to come out of it. But then there was a gentleman who was in the Anaheim Union School Board who got elected to the city council. So everybody kind of rallied and said, like, hey, you should put your name in the hat in the ring to get appointed. And I was not in a mood, but then, because of some folks who actually told, go ahead and do it, I put my name in the ring. And I think there was like about 30 odd people who applied. And then the board ended up, sifting through them and came to the final 3. And then they appointed me to the board. So got appointed, then ran for re-election a couple of times. And then I always said that I wanted to serve 2 terms, and that was it. In our district, we don't have a term limit. But I always thought that, you got to give your best shot within 2 terms and do everything you possibly can, and then leave, right? So that you can bring some new blood. So, and then I was also active in the local party, which allowed me to join Supervisor Chafee when he got elected to supervisor. He tapped me as deputy chief, and then eventually became his chief of staff. So,
and you ran, you sort of had the Barack Obama challenge, right? Is that you're Muslim American with a name like Al Jabbar in a mostly Latino, Asian, white area to win not that easy to to build that acceptance? How did you do that?
Yeah, I always I give this story because when we all decided to kind of help, there were friends who actually got together, and I'm not going to name him publicly. Basically said, Al, I don't think you're going to win because you got appointed, but you got to run for re-election, right? And it was a heavily Latino district, and there was a Hispanic lady who was running, and then there was another uh, uh, woman who was running. So at the end of the day, they all said, you know what, without Jabbar, I don't know, you could win it. So let's go ahead. Maybe you should change it as, you know, Al, Alejandro Jabbar. Help you. So, I said, if I win or lose, I want to do it in my terms, and I'm going to do it. So when I got elected, that was a joke that I would tell everybody, saying like, I'm Al Jabbar from Michoacan. So, but yeah, so I mean, it was a challenge, but I think uh, politics is such that, especially when it's retail, right? When it's in the grassroots level, it's about understanding the issues and who's able to kind of really uh, navigate that and bring resources to the community and make a change. And I think folks in my district saw in the first 2 years that I was appointed what I was doing. And so it was easy for me to have that conversation. And then I definitely had a lot of support from parents and community leaders. And I think that I want to say, emphasize that heavily, that they kind of carried me through that process. So.
Oh, Nate. Orange County, David, you should ask these questions because you served 13 terms in Congress. So let's dive into the congressional races.
Well, first of all, I want to welcome you as Brian did earlier, and thank you for being with us, and thank you for your service to your community. And I had a fellow by the name of Adri Jarate, who is Sri Lankan and he worked on my staff for many years, and he ended up being an assistant secretary of labor.
Wow.
In the Obama administration. So I learned from him a little bit about Sri Lanka, and also learned about Orange County, because when I was in the Air Force in California, in the evenings I went to school, got my graduate degree in history at Chapman College, which is
Okay.
right
around the corner.
So we got a little connection in those two areas. So I'm just really glad to be with you. So we've got this big election coming up, and outside of the presidential piece of it, which is huge, the biggest piece, but there is also who's going to control the House and the Senate. And I'm particularly interested in the House for a variety of reasons, having served there so long, but also the power it may play in the presidential along the way. So we're, I think, 5 seats short, the Democrats are, in gaining control. And people are looking at California, particularly around Orange County, because there's 2 or 3 seats there that have been heavily contested. And also in New York State, there is 4 seats that Biden won, but are being represented by Republicans now, and we think we have a shot at closing the gap there as well. There are other places as well, including my old district in Macomb County in Michigan. But let me ask you this. Can you give me your assessment of where do you think were those California, Orange County seats?
Yeah. Orange County, we got quite a number of seats. We got like the former Katie Porter. I mean, I should say former. She's still the congresswoman, but her race, that's become very, very contentious with Dave Min running and Scott Barr. Unfortunately for Dave Min, I think they're pummeling him with the DUI that he had last year. I think right before the primary, and that's kind of dragging him down a little bit. Although his opponent during the primary also pummeled him with it, but the Democratic base knew Dave Min, and that helped him to kind of get to the top. But in a general election, I think the last poll that I saw that he was down by about 6 to 8%, whichever poll that we look at, right? But he'd been bringing some heavy hitters to campaign for him, this whole week. We had Bill Clinton come by, and then I think we had a couple of celebrities who came by too. So it's going to be a very tough race, and it also depends on how many people turn out to vote. And I thought that he made a strategic mistake there too, and it'll come down to some of our Muslim votes in that district. Um, I was trying to engage with him at the beginning as well on that particular issue, but I think the community is going to stay out of that race. So it's going to be a pretty tough one there. And then there's Michelle Steele, which is my district now. Michelle Steele one, which again, there's a gentleman named Derek Tran who's running. He's Vietnamese American, and the district is very heavily, or I wouldn't say heavily. It's a significant amount of Vietnamese voters, which will make a big difference in the race, right? So I think the last two polls, he was up by 3 to 4%. So that's a huge deal.
Tron being the Democrat in this race, right?
Yeah.
Right. Thank you.
Well,
Yeah.
can you? What percentage of Asian Americans are in basically these two districts you just talked about? Do you know what roughly it might be?
I can't pull the exact number on that one, but I know that I've been working on the Muslim American voters. I know the Dave Min race, there's close to about 5,800 voters. And in the Derek Tran race, there's about 10,200 voters, right?
Oh.
So those are going to be critical. With Derek Tran's race, matter of fact, inside baseball, about 2 weeks ago, a few of us leaders got together, and because there was a young group of folks who were very engaged with the Palestinian cause, had engaged Derek Tran, but were not satisfied with his statement. And as a result, they were so engaged to the point where they got themselves organized. And these were first-time young voters, right? I wouldn't say they're young first-time voters, but young first-time engaged in politics, to the point where they actually put together a team to do a no on Derek Tran phone bank within the district, within our community. And fortunately, we had another leader who ended up reaching out to Derek Tran, and then we had a meeting till about 1 o'clock with this group of folks, and turned that around. So we're hopeful that it'll be very good for Derek Tran. So we're hoping that it will eventually get him elected. So,
well, just for your information, we have obviously in Michigan, which I represented for most of my career, we have a large Muslim and Arab American community. Arab American devoted, split between Muslim and Christian. But the point I want to make is that Biden carried that district, the state, in those communities, very heavily. In fact, in Dearborn, a city of 100,000, Biden won that 75-25. We're not going to be that. It's not going to be that high this time. In fact, we're struggling to split.
Right.
And it's because, of course, Gaza, which we've transitioned into, Brian. I'm sorry. I think maybe
No. Let's go right to the main topic.
right, because of the horrific situation in what happened in Gaza. Over 40-some thousand people killed, and most of them innocent, children and women and older people. It was horrific to watch that over a period of months, and then to have our government involved in it in some implicitly in terms of providing intelligence and weapons to the Israelis was very disturbing to me. And I can understand, because I worked with the Muslim community very closely when I was in the U.S. Congress on profiling issues, and you name it. I was on foreign policy issues. I was involved in it. Didn't have a lot of friends actually when I was there, and so we tried to put together a group of people who would speak out on their behalf when we thought it was important and necessary to do so. So we're hopeful. Michigan is tight, so it could go either way. I've been working with the Ukrainian American community because I'm Ukrainian. I wear this Ukrainian little thing around my neck every day, so people will ask me, "What is that?" And then I can tell them about Ukraine. But that's not the subject here. The subject is the Muslim community, and I'm hopeful that they will see in the end that is horrific if all this was. Our candidate Harris, Kamala, is going to be so much better than Trump on virtually everything they care about. And so I hope they will move in that direction. I imagine that was the discussion you were just talking about that you had with the young students, I suspect.
Partly that's what it is, right? But it's also hard for us as leaders to actually go to family members who lost. I know a friend of mine who's also elected official up north. He lost 80 extended family members, right? And that was in like one swoop, one bomb. I think killed like almost close to about 50 of them, right?
Yeah.
So it's hard for us as leaders to go to folks like that and say like, hey, consider voting for the Democrats or consider voting for Kamala Harris. I think she had an opening, and this is where I fault the Democratic leadership, is that if you take a look at the grassroots, I know for a fact, because we are organizing and we actually talk to grassroots folks who are part of central committees, right? Majority of them empathize and are supportive of some sort of sanctions or some sort of statement which will be very strong to talk about this issue. But unfortunately, the Democratic political leadership has decided that they don't want to do that, right? And that's what's happening right now. And that, I mean, if we had Democratic leadership coming out and saying it, and I think, she had a really good shot during the convention if she would have allowed 5 to 7 minutes for a Palestinian American
Right
to speak. I think that would have allowed people to say that, what, the Democratic Party is listening to us, right?
Right.
And that would have allowed us to actually go out there and say, like, look, you know what? This guy is not the guy for you. Look, at least we're getting a seat at the table, right?
Yeah.
But it's unfortunate. And I'm the conversation that we had with those leaders are the same thing. Is like, the local leadership, young, and they're very new to this. Obviously, they don't understand. I wouldn't say they wouldn't understand. I think they're new to the part of looking at issues and saying, hey, you know what? This person's bad for education, for healthcare, for all of that, right? Right now, Muslim Americans, although they really value and they're very engaged in like the education aspect of it and healthcare aspect of it and labor aspect of it, this election has become a one issue for them, right?
Yeah.
And they see that both parties, Republicans and Democrats, don't listen, right? So now they're kind of moving towards voting third party, and it's very tough. But there are folks who are saying, I've been one of those people, small voices, who is trying to say like, look, you know what, if you want to send a message in California, in Oregon, and all these states where we know that the Democrats are going to win nationally, let's vote a third party to send a message. But when it's a swing state, let's try to be more judicious in trying to work it. But it gets drowned out because people are so hurt, right?
Yeah,
So,
they're in pain and they're emotionally invested in the lives of their families and friends who were destroyed, and so that's certainly, for me, it's very understandable why they're doing what they're doing. Although I think your formula is probably a very good one in terms of you've got to be more judicious in your overall broad look at it in terms of, because Harris is going to give them a seat at the table. She just said that time and time again, and just the other night when she gave her speech, that and Trump won't let him in. That's the way he has been throughout his whole time of office, and so we'll see what.
I got to ask you, because you've been in dealing with the White House when you were in Congress. Why has Biden been so feeble in his fighting genocide. I just saw in today's paper, the last 48 hours, 50 children were killed in a refugee camp. And, you know, we know he's saying stuff in private, but why has he been so weak?
Well, he has a lot of pressure from, he's been aligned with the Jewish community for his whole career. And that's a long career. That's a half a century. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, it's not clear to him, as it is to us, of what's going on here. That in the name of the United States, implicit in these actions, these bombings and intelligence sharing, were the lives of all these people. And we were like alone with Israel and the United Nations, 190 countries. And we stood alone with them, maybe in a handful of other countries, to sanction this. And it was just horrific. And people I think understand how damaging this has been for our reputation around the world.
1.8 million Muslims in the world, right? 25% plus of the population. And this is America's record. And Al, emotionally, how does the community process this, seeing a genocide happen, play out? How are you coping with it? Is the community coping with it and trying to, you know, emotionally, it's so challenging.
I think right now, and that's one of the things that we've been doing is, I was part of a PAC which organized people to, get involved in politics for a long time. And it was very tough for immigrant community, especially in our community, kind of, get them to do the donations and, come out and vote or organize and stuff like that. And we're seeing a surge. We're seeing a surge of people just getting involved just because of this, right? And we're telling them, I think it's important to show our organizational power and our political power in terms of how important it is. And we see that, some of our congressional, even local candidates come and tap our community for donations, political contributions, and, they'll take a nice little picture and then go put it out there. But when it came to voting or even extracting a statement, asking them to condemn the genocide or condemn these actions, they pretty much retreated, right? So in this particular election, we are putting out a voter guide, which we literally we're asking folks for no vote on these elections. And some of these are very strongly competed or, competitive races. I mean, the Scott Barr, Dave Min race is one thing that's very, very tough. And I remember having conversations with Dave Min, and he was stuck in that, situation where, I want to give a statement, but then at the same time, I know that I'm going to get pummeled with AIPAC money, right? So I think at the end of the day, it comes down to that. They're afraid of how the AIPAC money would be utilized in these campaigns, especially when it's very close. But the Muslim Americans have realized that it's very important to now engage, not only engage, but also politically show their muscle in each of these districts. And that's why I think they're taking it very emotionally, and they're channeling it towards organizing. And I love the fact that our community has come to that. And I think, it's very unfortunate in Michigan. I know that last week I saw some of the imams just got on the stage and decided to endorse Trump. Yeah. And we were pulling our hair here. But at the end of the day, right, for them, when you ask them, they're like, well, you know what? He promised us that he's going to stop this war. I said, well, you know what? He might probably stop the war by telling Netanyahu to go clean up the entire Gaza Strip and West Bank, right? And that's not what we want. But at the end of the day, I think they're also looking for somebody to come in and listen. And that's where I think that the Democratic Party lost a great opportunity. If they would have just given the opportunity to listen, I think we would have had leaders saying like, you know what, let's give a shot to Kamala, right? So,
I think if Harris loses this election, this will be one of the important points that of what failures, right? I think she's run a pretty clean race, but out on this one, no.
A fabulous race, I think. She's been smart, tough, and but you're right, Brian. If this ends up, we lose Michigan because of this, it's would be a real tragedy. I don't think we're Michigan, but I think we're it, but you never know.
yeah, it's not only Michigan, unfortunately. And then this is why locally when I talk, I say like, you know, maybe there's enough Republicans who are discontent with Trump that they will, you know, switch over to voting for Kamala. And then women, right? Women, I think, overwhelmingly supporting. I was looking at some polls because if you look at Arizona, Pennsylvania, Georgia, we have a huge margin, which actually they lost by, right? That's the margin is the Muslim votes. In
Yeah.
Arizona, we have like closer to about, I believe, 20,000 votes. In Nevada, we got it. In Pennsylvania, I believe there's about 100,000, maybe closer to.
Yeah.
So those are folks who are either going to vote third party or just basically not vote at the top, but they're going to go down ballot and vote for the rest of the election, rest of the races. So this is where, as a Democrat, I'm worried, but at the same time, I'm sitting there and going like, well, you should listen to local folks in hearing them out. Locally here in Orange County, we wanted to just pass a resolution and it was shut down heavy-handedly, right? And that gave a lot of discontent to the point where they didn't even let me speak at the delegate Orange County Central Committee meeting. Usually they would allow like, you know, local elected, former elected official to speak on behalf of an issue. I raised my hand to speak and the chair basically said, nope, you know what, you're not a delegate, so we can't let you speak. And so those type of things resonates with our community and you know, it gets out, right? People are watching and saying like, this is how you're treating our community and we're not being heard. So.
And you know, I think not just Muslim Americans on this issue. There's a whole awakened. You know, I'm thinking of my 25-year-old daughter, and her friends are not motivated to vote for Harris. I think she'll end up voting for Harris just because of a strategic mindset. But a lot of them won't because of the genocide, and they're so appalled at basically Biden sending bombs still to Israel, right? We're not, people know that a lot of the weaponry and targeting, as David said, is still coming from this country. Let's pivot a second we only have a few minutes left to one, you can just go around to both. We ask two questions at once so we get a wrap here. One is, David and I are exploring this question of how do we strengthen our democracy long term. I think that's the central focus of this show. And so, Al, we want to get your insights on that. And then also, we'll come back. Let's also do a once around on election predictions, where you think this thing will land on Tuesday.
Sure. I think our young people are the future, right? And that's where we got to build. And that's why I was very happy to work on those issues at Anaheim Union High School District. We started at the grassroots level to give agency to our young folks, which allowed them to, you know, own it and run with it. And I see a difference. Like our local community college political science professor would always say, you know what, I see a difference in kids coming out of Anaheim Union High School District and other high schools because they're so engaged to the point where they can name their local council member, local school board member, and others don't because we have created that environment and support system for young people to thrive in. And I think that needs to be a template all across the country so that we could get our young people to be engaged and not lose hope, right? I mean, you mentioned about your daughter, Brian. At the end of the day, young people are watching this too, right? They're looking at it from a lens of like, hey, are these parties allowing for different discourse or different opinions? And the Democratic Party has always said, like, hey, we're a big tent, right? And does that tent include everybody? And I think you cannot um, pull the wool over our young people because they're very smart. They're very engaged. They're like that social media savvy, and they know how to do it to the point where I think we need to invest more in our young folks in terms of building our democracy. So
We talked about that last week, Al. We talked about civic engagement and democratization in the classroom and getting that same type of thing that's out of Anaheim and go broader aspect of that throughout the country, not only in Anaheim. So
yeah.
that's underway, thanks to Brian and the mix of people and a lot of other folks who are working on this. But it needs another big shove.
Yeah, yeah. And I think a lot of the school districts kind of don't put this as front and center because they're, obviously more focused on the fact that, oh, I need to get my scores up. But I think under the leadership of Mike Matsuda, we've created where we allowed this part of it to thrive, which is kind of, eventually got our scores up too, right? Because
Right.
they're more engaged in other issues and they understand how to apply their critical thinking skills. So
Absolutely. Yeah, I do work with Anaheim Union, and those kids know how to speak up.
Yeah.
They know how to take action.
Yep.
And I love what Superintendent Matsuda also values diversity. Like if you come in as a Spanish speaker, that's an asset. That's not a deficit. How do you celebrate people's diversity and talents and languages? And that really is a model for the rest of the country, that civic education there.
And it's celebrating the country because that's what we are, a diverse country and a country of immigrants. And it's sharing those values and cultures are just what make it much richer as a country.
absolutely.
So the last question is, where's this race going to end up? And then how to stay sane on election day too. So a little pastoral advice too from both of you.
Well, if you're a runner or an exerciser in any way, make sure you get a lot of that this week. Go around the block, run through the park, get on that bicycle or that elliptical machine or aerobics machine or whatever you do. Yoga, do a lot of it because it will help keep you healthy and it will keep you in shape so you can get out and knock on those doors that are needed to be knocked down in the next 48 hours. So I would say that's important, and I think also important is to understand from that perspective the great challenge that we have here in this country to keep our democracy going. It's the oldest democracy in the history of the world in terms of representation and what the values it's brought to the rest of the civilized and especially Western world, but more so now even beyond that. And we're going to give that up. I think not. And I think when you have a candidate that talks about going after the enemy within, as Trump has done, and overturning votes in Georgia and electors in other states and engaging in insurrection, I think that's very, very dangerous. We're right at the cusp now. So we need people with courage to stand up, speak out, and to do what's important to get this idea that democracy is a much better choice, freer choice, a better choice than the autocracy and dictatorship that Trump is actually moving into.
Absolutely.
Al, what's you didn't give us a prediction though, David.
I'll give one. I think Kamala Harris is going to win, and I think there's going to be a huge wave of women voters that are going to help propel that. But I think there's going to be a huge number of young people who are going to be supportive of her as well, larger than we've seen in the past. And this Iowa poll that came out, last night is significant because it's the state of Iowa that's voted heavily for Trump before. He won by 8 and 9%, 16, 20. and or vice versa, 8 and 16, 9%, and or 9, 16, 8% and 20 over the Democratic candidate. But now he's behind.
Yeah.
And there's a reason for that. And I think his language is one of it. This pollster in Iowa, I know her. I've known her for decades.
And Selzer, yeah.
Ann Seltzer, not personally, but I know of her work, and she is as good as they get in terms of the credibility of her polling and what she does. So I'm very buoyed by that. Of course, it could be an outlier, but I don't know. If we win Iowa, that blue wall got extended, and you can make sure that if we win Iowa, we're going to win Wisconsin and Michigan as well.
You're right, David, because I think when I was breaking down the polls in there, I think what was giving the win for Iowa was the women voters, right? I think that was where the significant. I think Iowa lost the men, but she was winning the women voters for a big margin. So I think that's propelling, and I feel like that's what's going to be. What's that?
Independent women as well.
Yep. So. Yeah, my prediction is that she'll win it too. But to be sane in terms of what to do in the next 42 hours, I think you're right. Just go for a walk and get some good fresh air. And if you're walking for a candidate or you're walking, do that part diligently. I know locally I've been helping out some local candidates run, but as a community, what we're looking at is how to bring them forward because if Kamala wins, she'll need our community to win these critical races in 2 years when it comes to winning back, some of these seats, right?
Right.
I feel like I want to say that we'll probably win the House with some of these races. Senate is most likely a lost cause. So unless there's a whole lot of folks like, in Texas, we flip that one that was looking promising, but I don't know. I've not seen the latest polls there.
Yeah.
Some of that stuff happens. Maybe we'll hold on to the Senate. But my part has always been, I've always said, like, let's focus on what's in front, but let's also look at what's in the future, right? Try to get people to organize and bring the team back together. I think our community, we need to do a lot of work to dispel that. Hopefully when she wins, she'll digress from this policy and really show that she's really committed to a balanced approach, which allows us to go back to the community and say, look, she's doing what she told she was going to do, right? So.
Yes, I agree with you too. I think she'll win mainly because Trump has she's run a good campaign, except for how she's handled the genocide and war. But if she loses, I think that is one of the primary reasons. But I think women will save the democracy along with maybe young people. At least I'm hoping. But I think that I'm trying to stay sane that either way, this is a fight. It's a long-term fight for democracy and justice. And if she wins, let's celebrate for a day and then hold her feet to the fire, right?
Yeah, that's how it's done.
That's how it's done. Al, thanks so much for joining us and have a wonderful rest of your Sunday here. And for David and myself, thanks for watching the show today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye.
All right.
Bye.